Hey guys, welcome back to another video brought to you by the Salt Road Quartermasters. Today we'll be focusing on another deck tech, and I'm going to start with a question for you, the viewer. What gets you salty when you play a game of Magic the Gathering? Is it counterspells? Looking around the table turn 2 and seeing someone else other than you already has a million mana? Infect? Well, if you answered yes to any of those, shove your other decks aside and start building this budget brew and dominate your playgroup. But enough of the fluff. Let's talk about why you should be piloting this $50 budget Estrid Enchantress Matter deck. Boy, that was a mouthful. The TLDR of this is a highly synergistic Enchantress style deck that uses enchantments to gain value through card draw and a stacks package to slow your opponents down in the process. The main goal of the deck is to generate lots of mana and flex on your opponents that thought that turn 1 Soul Ring would keep them in the mana lead. Then, after getting tired of flexing, sink all that mana into other value cards and leave your opponents in the dust. Luckily for us, Magic has been printing a lot of Enchantments Matters cards from the beginning, so our card pool is massive and even better, cheap. Who needs duels, fetches, or those expensive mana rocks when you've got enchantments that do all that, plus with the synergy package, which I'll talk about later, draw you cards. Take that, Underground Sea, and that stupid $500 price tag. So some might be asking, why Estrid? Why not the other legendaries that were printed alongside her in the commander deck she originates from? Well, this is one badass bitch, pardon my language, and she's the only queen you'll need. Tuvasa sounds pretty inviting with that one extra card a turn, but don't let her fool you. When you're tapping out every turn just to cast your spells, you'll wish you had the extra mana Estrid provides. Or, even worse, you're not untapping your lands because of a nasty player's Winter Orb or Back to Basics. Not only that, you'll be able to swing with impunity because more than likely your creatures will be enchanted and will have pseudo-vigilance, so you won't have to fear the crackback and will be able to defend your walker. And this little commander doesn't even have to worry about those silly little cards like Doomblade or most Edict-like effects, unlike some other so-called legendary creatures. But I guess I should actually say what her abilities do, just in case you didn't actually read the card on screen during the whole rant that I just did. Estrid is a 4-mana legendary planeswalker that casts for 1 generic and a Bant. Her first loyalty ability is a +2. Yes, you heard me correctly, a +2. And it's her best ability. Although I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What does the ability actually do? Well, it untaps all of your enchanted permanents. And while that might sound kind of underwhelming, there's a reason Prophet of Krufix is a banned card. Wilderness Reclamation, Terrified Standard, and the most fought-over creature on the battlefield is often a Seedborn Muse. Untapping your lands, creatures, you name it and enchant it, it'll untap. And oftentimes, with the amount of land enchantment ramp spells you run, she'll often be free after you +2 her. Her second ability is a -1, and it is to create a mask token aura that has totem armor, which allows the aura to be destroyed instead of the creature it's enchanted to. And while I think it's an okay ability, oftentimes it's unneeded, and I would rather be plussing her to try and ult instead of trying to save one of my own things, especially when swords and bounce effects are both easy ways to get around the totem armor. Luckily for us, we have another upside for being mostly enchantments. Unlike artifacts or creatures, while a vast majority of opponents' decks often have one removal spell that hits enchantments, they most likely only have the one. Heck, black and red have almost none to speak of in their colors, and this lets our enchantments live longer than if they were artifacts or creatures. Her last ability, her ult, is a -7, which mills the top 7 of her library and then returns all non-aura enchantments, followed up by auras, straight to the battlefield. Ultimates are made to win games, and this can definitely be one of those. Just imagine the look of horror on your opponent's faces when it's late in the game and your ult brings back basically your entire deck from the graveyard. So I keep talking about the oodles of mana you'll be having, and it's all true. From Wild Growth to Dawn's Reflection, there are a variety of different ramp spells that enchant lands. One of these benefits is most of them are very efficient for their mana cost, often being either 1 or 2 CMC, and are very innocuous. Every player knows to target the turn 1 Soul Ring, but not many know that the turn 1 Wild Growth, or Utopia Sprawl if you decide to upgrade, is just as bad. And it's not just land enchantments we run. There are also a few non-aura ramp spells, such as Omen of the Hunt, Core Cartographer, or the classic Kalini Heart Expedition. Now, what should we do with all this mana? Well, like any spoiled rich kid on Instagram, we should spend it and flaunt it freely. This deck allows you to be that person who posts a Reddit with the caption, "Hey, look at my battlefield XD," as you show off half your deck on the field and the other half in your hand. Let's start with Fairy Formation. Yes, it's an expensive ability, but flying creatures and card drop? Sign me up. Deciding that you want to hold up your mana for another player's turn? Well, flash in a Spectral Sailor and still have plenty of mana left to still interact with the board. Or just draw more cards. And last but not least, we have a good sleeper card, Veridity Circle. This enchantment lets you sink lots of mana into interacting with the board and drawing more cards. Have a player with an Eldrazi on board who's looking at you funny? Or need to tap down a blocker to swing in for lethal? Tap that sucker down and laugh as you draw off their suffering. Even though Estrid is still queen, she has some fine enchantresses backing her up, grinding out that value and making all the players groan and have to ask after every one of your turns, how many cards do you have in hand? To start, I guess I'll explain what an enchantress is. This is an effect that essentially is given to a card that draws cards from either casting an enchantment or having an enchantment enter, and this all harkens back to the OG enchantress, Argothian Enchantress. Not only does she draw you a card on enchantment cast, note it doesn't have to resolve, but she also has Shroud, so no pesky lightning bolts or doom blades heading her way. And for only 2 mana. Unfortunately, the only downside of her is her price tag, $13, youch. But as wizards over the year have printed many an enchantress, there are many more budget-friendly options. Instead, we are running Citizen Champion, as she grows very large very quickly. Eidolon of Blossom, as Constellation is a wonderful ability that says an enchantment only has to ETB to get the card draw. So not only does Flickering work, but it also synergizes with Estrid's ult. Core Spirit Dancer, Satyr Enchanter, and Mesa Enchantress add card density to the deck. And we also run a suite of enchantments that actually draw cards on their own, such as Omen of the Sea, Sixth Sense, and Cartouche of Knowledge. So we've seen how we progress our board. Now let's see how we can torment our opponents. I know some people say that people who play blue or stacks are no fun. I respond with, obviously they've never had the satisfaction of casting Counterspell in their life. And to all of them, all I have is pity as I sit opposite holding a hand of negates and counterspells. Not only do we run blue counterspells, but we also have glorious white creature removal and green's ability to remove pesky artifacts and enchantments from our opponent's side of the field. For single target removal, we run Swords to Plowshares, Reality Shift, and an all-star in this deck, Kenrith's Transformation. It is one of the best forms of removal we have against other commanders, but it is also an enchantment that synergizes with our enchantresses and draws a card itself, just in case we don't have the board presence already established. We also run staples such as Mind Control, Oblivion Ring, and Nature's Claim. But this wouldn't be Commander if we didn't include some board wipes. And to start off, we have Winds of Wrath, often a Plague Wind for 5 mana. This is a great way to clear away your opponent's side of the field while leaving yours intact. One of the other synergies of having a Planeswalker as a commander is we can wipe the board all day and not have to worry about recasting Estrid. We also run Aetherize to deal with untargetable creatures, or just an army of dudes we weren't expecting. Ideally, we would love to run Cyclonic Rift, but alas, it's not budget friendly. And another underutilized board wipe is Sunblast Angel. Yes, while it is situational, oftentimes it'll act as another Winds of Wrath, as you will be untapped while your opponents are not. Now, as you guys should know, hoping to just draw into certain cards in a 100 card deck isn't the most reliable way to get your combo pieces or interaction you need. So in the end, we run a tutor package from classics like Eladamri's Call, an all-star instant speed creature tutor, to Heliod's Pilgrim, the only good thing to come from Heliod. Hashtag Elspeth did no wrong. There are actually quite a few inexpensive tutors that people forget about, such as Neoform, Totem Guide Heartbeast, and even Open the Armory. And yes, it can grab enchantments, not just equipment. And if playing the Pauper isn't your thing and you'd rather just whip out your fat wallet and stun all the players with your expensive cards, this is a great area to upgrade. Mystical Tutor or Spell Seeker can get you your counter magic to protect or slow down your opponents. Worldly Tutor or Finale of Devastation can help you find your enchantresses easier, and Enlightened Tutor or Idyllic Tutor can grab any enchantment you want straight from your deck. Now, I know I've been singing the praises of this $50 competitive deck, but there are some downsides to having money to not only play Magic the Gathering, but also afford to eat while you're saving up for those duels you need so badly. And that downside is in fact our mana base. For a 3-color deck on a budget, we start with a Command Tower and tap dual lands such as Guild Gates. Cycle lands such as Prairie Stream put in good work for being as inexpensive as they are. And this is an area where I should add that Estrid's +2 comes in real handy. All you need to do is enchant the tapped land and it will untap and act almost like any other duel. This is one of the ways that you can deal with the slowdown that cripples other budget brews that run as many tap lands as we do. Another set of key lands in this deck are the bounce lands. We run a small sub package of untappers such as Kiora's Follower or Peregrine Drake. So these Karoo lands provide us with an insane amount of mana. For utility, we run the Temple Scry lands, as well as Halimar Depths for a pseudo brainstorm effect when paired with Evolving Wilds, and creature lands such as Stirring Wildwood, because people always forget about these as surprise blockers. Lastly, we run 6 forests, 6 islands, and 5 plains. And while it's generally pretty boring just talking about basic lands, with the amount we play, it makes us very resilient to Blood Moon / back to basic type effects. And lastly, before I get into Estrid's win condition and combo lines, I would be remorseful about not telling you about some of the best value cards that we have in the deck. One of these is Oath of Teferi. This legendary enchantment not only blinks something as it enters, allowing you to reutilize your ETB enchantments or constellation effects, but also lets you ult Estrid the turn after you play her. And best of all, she survives at 2 loyalty if she's been unmolested by the other players. Shimmering Wings is an unassuming aura that gives a creature flying, but lets you bounce it back to your hand for a blue and recast it to draw cards from your enchantresses or triggering constellation multiple times in a turn. All That Glitters is another aura that can turn even the wimpiest creature into a mighty game-ending threat, and Dance of the Manse is a great way to get back your enchantments, as well as gain an army out of the process. And Silent Sentinel is a Sun Titan for enchantments. By restricting your card selection, it actually forces you to really dig for cards and play things people are not expecting. Energy Flux is a hoser for any artifact deck, and even if it's not their main theme, most competitive decks run a lot of fast mana that this will put a quick end to. Along those same lines, Psychic Surgery is another cEDH hoser, as it stops a lot of instant speed tutor effects that put cards on top of their library. It also gains incremental advantage every time someone cracks a fetch. One word of warning though is, in this time of the global pandemic where most people are playing over webcam, this card can be problematic to actually function. Lastly, for the notable mentions is Sigil of the Empty Throne. Do you know how easy it is to win a game of Magic when you have an army of 4/4 flying angels? Well, I can tell you, it's pretty damn easy. This throne won't stay empty for long, as you'll generally be king shortly after getting this out on the battlefield. Now you've seen most of the deck, but it's time to get into the best part, winning. This isn't just a good stuff deck that you just play out your cards and hope eventually you'll take your opponents out. Nope, there are plenty of win cons and combos that this deck has that uses all of its synergies that we've discussed above. We'll start off inconspicuous, as I don't want to give you all heart attacks with the insane combos you can pull off. Urban Burgeoning plus Sunken Field on the same land gives you a force spike for every player's turn. Yes, some of you might be saying, how's that any good, especially when they can see it coming? Well, there's a few things you probably aren't thinking about. The first being, Commander is a complicated game, and people often just forget about things, especially things they don't deem a threat. And second, Force Spike can be counterspelled. Well, this is an ability that will need to be stifled, which is much more uncommon. So a player might have a force of will thinking it will protect him, but not realize you can still counter a spell without them even being able to do anything about it. The last thing is, this also gives you another land every turn to tap for mana. Maybe you need to swords one player's thing and hold up Dispel for another. Make sure you've enchanted a land that taps for anything, and you're golden. Now, with that out of the way, we can start ratcheting up the combos we have. Our first is an infinite mana combo in the form of Peregrine Drake and Temur Sabertooth. As long as you have 5 lands that tap for 8 or more mana, which is a pretty easy thing to do with all of our land auras, you'll be able to cast the Drake, untap your lands, and then pay 2 mana to bounce the Drake. You then recast the Drake, and you've net 1 mana, repeat, and you have infinite. And once you have infinite mana, you can generally find a way to win. Now, some of you might remember all the way back to the beginning when I mentioned Infect, and love it or hate it, it will still kill your opponents after 10 poison. And some might be asking how? Well, the answer comes in the form of a card called Corrupted Conscious. This mind control effect gives the added benefit of giving the creature Infect, so just grab your opponent's Eldrazi and take them out. But this isn't much of a combo, and that's where this lovely lady comes in. Bruna, Light of Alabaster. A powerhouse on her own, being able to bring back auras from the yard as well as cheat auras from your hand. She often can one-shot players when paired with another aura called Instill Energy. This green enchantment for some reason gives your creature haste, and with the additional auras you run, like All That Glitters, Bruna will often be able to take out an unprepared opponent. And now, one of the more wackier combos on this list, but one I can attest to you can manage to pull off. And that combo is Meadowmai the Ageless, plus Finest Hour, plus Battle Mastery, and Instill Energy. I know it seems convoluted with too many pieces, but if pulled off, this nets you 4 extra turns, which is just as good as winning. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this budget take on Estrid Enchantments. I am proud of the deck because it really opens up the creative building process. Just because you limit certain deck building aspects doesn't mean you don't limit your card selection as well. This actually opens up just as many card choices and even allows you to find some great sleeper cards that people just don't expect. Estrid can lead to some really explosive turns, generating a stupid amount of mana, and you almost feel like a storm deck half the time when you play out all the cards and then draw even more cards and netting you even more mana. But most of all, the wonderful thing about this deck is the variety of play angles you have at any one time. Almost like a puzzle that keeps unfolding, revealing more of its secrets. You can one-shot someone, assemble a combo, steal key pieces, disrupt your opponents, ult Estrid to change the game, make an army of tokens, or make one dude really huge out of nowhere. You won't be bored with all this deck synergy, and with Wizards constantly printing more Enchantment Matters cards, there'll be great upgrade opportunities for this deck, and the deck is ever changing. Hey guys, hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, please leave a like or comment on the video and consider subscribing, as it really helps us continue to make more content. And as always, stay salty.